Welcome to Confessions of a Parent Coach. I'm Coach, a mother of four, and potty talker, Ann Kaplan. This is the podcast where I confess something from my own parenting and coaching life, teach a lesson around it, and answer your questions. Even we parenting experts are far from perfect, and the real magic happens when we get down with all that imperfection. We get into the gritty side of parenting here, so earbud up and dive in.
Hey, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the podcast. Excited to talk to you about something. I'm going to sneak attack you today. So, the official topic of this podcast episode is sleeping and sleep training. So, if you have young kids, you're probably listening right now. If you're not getting enough sleep at night, you're probably listening right now. But I'm sneak attacking you because there's a big sort of life lesson in parenting woven in there. Big surprise, right? Surprise. For the first time ever, it's only going to be a surprise to you if this is your first top podcast episode that you're listening to, because if you've been listening for a while, you know that I like to weave in life lessons pretty much constantly. It's my superpower and my kryptonite, as I'm constantly looking at the big picture. When I started my business, this is a little sidebar, but when I started my business and I was like giving presentations and stuff like that, I asked a couple friends for feedback, and the number one request that like feedback that I got from people was put in more like real life examples of all this stuff. And for me, I was like, that's not helpful. Like that's just like one granular moment. And, the way my brain works is I'm constantly making like general like applications of like the big picture approach here. And, I'm going to waste so much time if I'm constantly just talking about tiny little nuclear granular moments, right? Which I've learned over the years working in my practice is totally not true. Like it's huge. Those examples are everything for people, but it was a challenge for me in the beginning because I'm such a big picture person to remember like people need like specifics. So anyway, we're going to talk about sleep today, and that is going to teach you something huge about parenting. So, my confession for you is I have four kids, as you know. My first three kids all were sleeping through the night by, I'd say, 4 months old, maybe 6 months old, because of what I'm going to tell you about today. Um, but my fourth kid, I don't know what happened, but like I completely lost touch with this philosophy that I'm about to teach you today. And I did not do any sort of sleep training or facilitating his sleep properly until he was over a year old. And I was losing my mind. And that has been the hallmark of my fourth kid in many ways. Like, I think I relaxed a lot, which is a blessing and a curse. I relaxed a lot about things that I was too rigid on, but I also kind of lost connection with some of these parenting principles that I only reconnect with when, the shit hits the fan or things get to the point where they're like unbearable or whatever. And it's like, oh my God, why didn't I just remember what I've already learned three previous times and do it a fourth time? I don't know. I can't explain it. But sleep training was definitely one of those things. I don't know. I like lost my nerve or something like that. So that was my confession for you. And I want to talk about sleep training in the context of this larger message. So, a lot of my clients with young kids, one of the things that we work on is sleep. My kid's not sleeping through the night, or my kid was sleeping through the night. And so, but now they're not. Help me, what do I do when my kid keeps waking up at night? My kid goes to sleep okay, but then wakes up in the middle of the night, like, and won't go back to sleep. My kid ends up in my bed every night, blah, 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 blah. The first thing I'm going to tell you about sleeping is if it works for you, there's nothing wrong with it. Bed sharing, co-sleeping, not sleep training at all, you know, bed sharing until your kid is however old, like there's no wrong answer here whatsoever. The only wrong answer is for you to continue to do something that you hate or that is really impacting your life. Like I talked to a dad last week who was like, my life is completely derailed because I haven't slept properly in a year and a half. And it's like, well, yeah, there's a reason why sleep deprivation is a form of torture. Like it messes with your head. It absolutely compromises who you are. So the only wrong answer around parent family sleep is the answer that is causing you misery, and it's just not how you want to live your life. If that's you, now it's time for us to do something about sleep. You will never hear me prescriptively say, oh, your kid is XYZ years old, they should be sleeping in their own bed through the night by themselves. No, nope. There's no rule that says that. That's not true. Um, so that's the first thing I want you to know is, like, if you're thinking that you need to sleep train just because your sleep in your family doesn't look like how you think it's supposed to look, I encourage you to take a step back and ask yourself, like, is this working for you? Because if it is, like, you know what? Your challenge isn't fixing sleep because the sleep isn't broken. Your challenge is changing your mindset about doing things your own way and accepting that it might not look like, the generic um, standard. And that's not a problem, right? But this is for the people who are like, no, yeah, I definitely do want to change my sleep thing, and it's not because society told me to, it's because I hate this. If that is you, then yeah, let's talk about sleep training. So rule of thumb is your kiddo theoretically is ready for sleep training when they have both. I used to say either one or the other, but now I say both doubled their birth weight and passed about 4 months of age. And nature is just so good at telling us when our kids are um, ready for sleep training, because most of our kids go through a sleep regression somewhere between 4 months old and 1 year old. And I see all the time on like mom forums and stuff like that, oh, my kid is going through the 6 month sleep regression, or I'll say, hear other people call it the 4 month sleep regression or the 10-month sleep regression. They're all talking about the same sleep regression. That sleep regression happens because your child has connected the dots. A cognitive development has happened in their brain where they are able to understand that they have an impact and effect on the world around them. The world isn't just happening to them and they're like a passive, passenger. Nope. Now they understand and they're experimenting with this idea that, like, if I do this, this happens. I can actually control the world around me. And they start to play their parents like a fiddle, and they're supposed to. That's normal. When that sleep regression happens, what's happening isn't that all of a sudden your kiddo is like can't sleep, or there's something actually happening that makes it so that their sleep is disrupted. It's the same normal kind of REM cycle that was happening all along. It's just that they're more alert and they're more conscious now. So they actually wake a little bit more than they would when they were younger. But also, their brain is exploding with curiosity and learning. And so now they realize, like, oh, I'd rather go back to sleep by my mom or my dad holding me right now, or I don't really like sleeping alone, or whatever. And they cry, or they wake up and they wake you up, or whatever. That sleep regression is part of their development of interacting with the world around them. It's not just something that's happening because of their sleep pattern or their sleep needs or whatever like that. Now, whoever's listening to this and thinking 4 months old, that's way too young to sleep train a baby. Cool. Don't do it then. Do not do anything that feels wrong to you. Remember, I started this whole thing out by saying whatever works for you, that's the way that you should be handling sleep in your family. So just don't do anything that doesn't feel right to you, or doesn't seem like the right timing to you, or your kid's not ready for it, or you don't want to do it. Awesome. You do you. Now, here comes the parenting life lesson. When our kids are born, when our kids are newborns, when they're babies, thank God things have changed over the years. And now most of us are being told, by our midwives, by our doctors, by our nurse, like whomever, is kind of shepherding us into, here's your baby. um, baby led, right? Baby led latch, baby led breastfeeding, baby led feeding out of a bottle, doesn't matter. Baby knows what they need. And when a baby cries, it's because they need something. They needed their diaper changed. Maybe they have a gas or a tummy ache. They are hungry. There's a reason. And I would go so far now. the hippie crunchy mom who had her kids at home and all of that stuff. I used to be a birth doula and all that good stuff. You know, when I would go so far as to say, especially a newborn baby, an awake baby is a hungry baby. Like your baby, when they are born, is so not done. They're like, I want you to think about like a kangaroo still coming in and out of the pouch. And that's the way that it needs to be. That is absolutely true. An awake baby is a hungry baby. Babies are leading us. They don't have the cognitive ability to be manipulating us or, having crocodile tears or anything like that. And that's a really, really important approach to parenting that is fundamental. And this is why, like, even the most conventional, like hospital births and doctors are giving parents this advice. Um, Whereas, in the past, it wasn't like that. We know now it's super important. And it's not just important for the baby's medical or biological, thriving. It's really important for them in creating a secure attachment. The more that their needs are met and quickly, the more that the baby feels safety and connection and bonding and a healthy attachment to their parental figure. And we know that that is the number one most important thing for kids. Now, attachment doesn't just get formed in those first 3, 4, 5, 6 months. Attachment is something that continues to develop in a child's life. But those first times, those first months in a child's life where they are having their needs met and being taken seriously. Believe babies is basically what I'm saying when it comes to newborns. That's really important for them, and it should be that way. But here's that life lesson, like, things change. Your baby's cognitive development changes. Sometime between 4 months and a year, that sleep regression is going to happen. That cognitive development is going to happen. Now, don't get me wrong. There's some babies who don't show that cognitive development in a sleep regression. It shows up in other ways, but it's the cognitive development is going to happen. And once that happens, like, this is why I, as a parenting professional, love the sleep regression, because it is a sign that our kids are capable of actually learning things. And what it really means is that we now have an opportunity to teach. And sleep training for a lot of families is the first time where we go from that to that paradigm shift from baby led to parent led. And when I say parent led, I do not mean parent controlled. I do not mean authoritarian parenting. I do not mean that you're a dictator and you're the boss of your kid's life and now you get to control them now that they're 4 months old. No, 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 no. But it means that you now are stepping into a leadership role that you weren't in before. Your baby was the leader and before. Your baby was in charge. Now it's time for you to be in charge. And I see often, this is totally apart from sleep training, but the sleep training could be a reflection of this. But I see very often that we're slow on the uptake, parents. We underestimate our kids every step of the way. We're always like 3 clicks behind. That we're like, oh, wait a second, you're walking now? Okay. It's the same thing with these cognitive developments. Like, we are behind often as parents. We're the last to realize, like, oh, my kid can handle this. Oh, my kid actually is capable of learning things. Oh, I can actually set boundaries with my child. And so this like shift, this paradigm shift that, in my opinion, is fundamental to a healthy parent-child relationship, is for the parent to be in the lead role and for the parent to be in that authoritative space. It happens late sometimes, or we almost like avoid it because we don't want to be in that like dynamic with our kids. It requires us to say no, it requires us to set boundaries, it requires us to consequence our kids, and it requires us to tolerate and get to a place of acceptance of our kids' negative emotions and negative reactions to those boundaries and saying no and things like that. It's hard. It's a big change. It's almost like a 180 that we need to do by assessing, okay, are my kids ready for that 180 now? Here I go. But if you notice that you are in a passive role with your child, if you struggle to set boundaries, and this can be any aged kid. Okay. We're not talking about babies only right now. If you have not stepped into, in a real way, that role as the leader in your family, the leader in your parent child relationship, the authority, the authoritative person, not authoritarian, authoritative person in the relationship with your child, you probably are experiencing a lot of struggles in your parenting, a lot of power struggles, a lot of probably negotiations and arguments and cajoling and um, feeling like maybe you're getting walked all over and that things are really off the rails and your kid might even seem a little bit out of control to you. And so often it's because this one thing hasn't happened. We haven't shifted. The dynamic hasn't shifted. And we are parenting a 5-year-old like an infant still, or a 15-year-old even, in this one way. I'm not saying you're still like putting diapers on your 15-year-old or babying your 15-year-old necessarily, but that this one thing that was appropriate when your kiddo was 3 months old, it's not appropriate when your kid is 3 years old. And it's not appropriate when your kid is 13 years old. So that's the life lesson I want you to take from this. You get to decide if you're going to, how you're going to, approach sleep. Like I said, you don't have to sleep train your kid if you don't want to, but really ask yourself, have I stepped into this, the age appropriate way for me to show up in this relationship with my kid? And the answer to that, if it is no, may mean that part of what you want to do is sleep training. If we're talking back again about the little kids. There's a million different ways to do it. You do not need to do it's not, I think a lot of parents are reticent to do sleep training because they feel like they're choosing between full on cry it out and abandonment or whatever, or just co-sleeping, or no sleep training at all, and sleep misery. And there's a huge spectrum all in between there. I would never advocate for someone to do a pure cry it out method, especially not with these younger ages that we're talking about, like a 4-month old or a 6-month old or something like that. But neither would I advocate for you to continue in sleep misery if you know it's not working for you. So usually my clients end up with some kind of a hybrid approach to sleep training, which is to, put your kiddo to bed. We all know this part. It's like every book says, put your kiddo to bed sleepy, but not asleep, and let them fall asleep on their own. So you put your kiddo to bed and they're, groggy or maybe even drifting off. If they're still nursing, they might be starting to fall asleep, while they're nursing or whatever, or on the bottle too. Also, that happens. And you put your kiddo to bed, and I really encourage you to have like a thing that you say every night. Like even now to my 10-year-old, I say the same thing I said to him when he was, a year old, which is like, good night. I love you so much. I'll see you in the morning. And put your kiddo to bed and walk out the room. And now your kiddo is not going to like necessarily this new way of being if this is super new. So be ready that your kid's going to protest. This is what this whole sleep regression, this neurological or cognitive development is all about. If I protest, might get what I want, right? I'm starting to understand that I have control and agency in this world, and I'm exercising that. Your child will definitely not be happy during parts of sleep training, and they will protest. They will express their dissatisfaction. So be ready for that and understand that it's not a problem. A crying 6-month old is not the same as a crying 6-week old. Okay. When a 6-week old is crying, they have unmet needs. When a 6-month old is crying, that might be the case, but obviously you were just in there. You just made sure that it isn't the case right now. They have an unmet want. This is a really great way to say what this cognitive development is, that kids, as they get older, start to develop not just needs, but wants and desires. And it's part of the struggle of humanity is that we don't always get what we want, just like Mick Jagger said, right? So this is that tricky lesson of sleep training, and it can be heartbreaking. I totally get it. This is one of the reasons why it's nice to work with a professional. So you're not just like, are you sure I'm doing the right thing here? That's something we figure out together. And once you have figured it out, I'm there to remind you and say, you know what, you're doing good. This is the plan. Remember this, remember that, blah, blah, blah. But I also think like when you are doing a hybrid approach to sleep training, like your baby's never going to be crying for more than 15 minutes. Like we do not just leave kids to cry themselves to sleep like that. If your kiddo's still crying in 15 minutes, you go back in the room and you pat him on the back. Never, ever, ever pick the baby up, but say, "Oh, I know it's hard. It's hard to fall asleep on your own. I love you so much. I'm right here for you. I'm right on the other side of the door," or whatever you want to say. But really just like a minute that you're in there, and then you walk back out of the room. Even if your kiddo's still crying, it's okay. And here's another thing that helps reassure parents. Like we have like studies that show, what's going on like brain pattern wise in a baby or a kiddo who is getting, periodic reassurance from a parent while they're crying versus just crying without end. And it's very different. Like your existence on this planet and your child's remembering of your existence on this planet actually changes the way their brain works. So you going in there and comforting your kiddo for a minute and then leaving them and then coming back in if they need it and comforting them again and leaving them, but not picking them up, not changing the boundary. So this is like one of the first, for a lot of parents, this is one of the first times that we're actually setting and enforcing a boundary with our kiddo, which is nighttime is for bed. We sleep in our own room, we sleep in our own bed space, whatever it is, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe the first time that you're setting boundaries with your kiddo. And you just keep doing that. And for some, I'll tell you what happened with my first kid when I potty trained, when I sleep trained him. The first night he cried for 45 minutes. So I went in there 3 times, maybe 4 times, and then he fell asleep. The second night he cried for 20 minutes. The third night he cried for 5 minutes. And then that was it. Took me 3 nights, you know, and that was the end of it. If they wake up in the middle of the night, you do the whole thing all over again. This client that I was talking to last week chose to do an approach, a modified version of what I'm describing to you. And same thing, 3 nights, and he is a new man. So, one of the reasons why we wait for the signs, we wait to know that our kid is ready for this, is because it's developmentally appropriate. It's something they're ready for. Just like potty training. If you try to potty train a 6-month-old, it's not going to work. But every potty training approach out there is going to tell you, like, you'll know your kid's ready to potty train when this, and this happen. You see all these signs. It is the same thing with sleep training. And that doesn't mean that it's not going to be hard. It doesn't mean it's not going to come with some heartache and tears. Of course it is. But it's time and it's okay. And it's the appropriate amount of heartache and tears, not something that's insurmountable or above your kid's pay grade or above your pay grade, right? And I want to tell you, like, the, sort of maybe uh redemption of this isn't just, oh my gosh, now I'm sleeping better and I have my life back and all that stuff. Although don't get me wrong, that's a big part of it. I remember the time when I sleep trained my first kiddo, and after those 3 nights, and he slept through the night, and I saw him the fourth night when I put him to bed, and I was like, it's night time. We did our nighttime ritual. We, get in bed. I said the same thing I said every night. I love you so much. Have a great sleep. I'll see you in the morning. And he just had this look on his face of like, good night, mom, and rolled over and went to sleep. And I had this like, oh my gosh, like I had really challenging postpartum time with this kiddo. That time when I sleep trained him was the time where I got this like total huge like tidal wave of like, that I'm a mom. This is my kid. I just did a parenting thing. I taught my kid a thing. And now he has this skill that he didn't have before. And it was hard for him to get it. And he had to go through those growing pains. We did it together. And now he's the next version of himself. And it is because I facilitated that. This is parenting. And I really got that paradigm shift in a huge, very concrete, like mic drop way. Like, oh, I get it now. I'm not just here to keep you alive and, you know, like you're, in the Matrix and I'm your pod. I'm like actually facilitating your growth. I'm teaching you stuff. Like I'm the leader now. That paradigm shift is huge and it sets us up for every single parenting moment from now until we leave this mortal coil. So think about that role that you have. I don't care how old your kid is. I don't care if you're sleeping through the night perfectly or you have no sleep troubles or whatever. This episode isn't about sleep training. It is about this role and dynamic that we have with our kids. I hope that's helpful for you. If you want help, like customizing a sleep training plan, for example, or making this paradigm shift that's kind of huge and profound, please reach out and set up that free discovery call with me. Let me help you. You do not need to figure this out alone. I didn't. I had guidance on sleep training, by the way. Um, and let yourself experience what it feels like to have these healthy dynamics with your kids, to have a full night of sleep also, by the way, and all of the wonderful magical loveliness that's available to us in parenthood when we are doing it healthily and really showing up the way we're meant to for our kids. Have a great week, everybody, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
The episode is over, but there's more waiting for you. You can grab my free workbook, Getting Kids to Listen the First Time, that walks you through the fundamental principles I teach all of my clients and applies them to this very universal parenting challenge. So if you're sick of repeating yourself all day long or just want to learn more about my style, you'll definitely want to go to bit.ly/kidswholisten. And if you're ready to work with me, let's meet. Set up a free call at bit.ly/Kaplan call, and let's create an action plan that gets you exactly where you want to go. And of course, links to all this goodness are in the show notes. Thanks for joining, and I'll see you next time.